Hello, my name is Matthew, and yesterday I was talking about reading challenging or difficult works of literature, and there was an aspect to that conversation that I don't think I touched on, um, but I believe is still very important, and it's how do you even get to the point um, to want to read um, difficult or challenging works? Why do you want to pick up a very old book or a very long book or a very strange book or something that you're just very unfamiliar with? So, how do you cultivate the desire to want to be a curious or adventurous reader? And for me, I was fortunate enough um, as I was a young man to meet um, a a very good friend of mine, my old friend Bob, who in my late teens and 20s, early 20s, um, talked to me about all of the pleasure and joy and instruction to be found in reading. And for me, I put myself at a disadvantage. It was a disservice that I was doing to myself. And it was this notion as a very young man, a late teenager, early 20, it was this notion that the things that I was already familiar with were really interesting things, and subjects or topics that I was unfamiliar with were probably less interesting. So, in my early stages of reading, and even my views on college courses and things like that, I was a very focused and deep student. I would read deeply, but not broadly. And um, it's only catching a very small part of all of the great things there are to learn and explore, and figuring out at some point, the hope is figuring out at some point that all of the great fun is learning the things that you don't know. Uh, and of course, there's a balance between reading deeply and reading widely, and it's a feast when you find that variety. And I thought I would just share a little bit of my own experiences and how I went from um, staying in a pocket that I was very comfortable with, and how I started exploring and finding um, things that were going to make me um, uncomfortable, or um, show very explicitly show what I don't know. And of course, uh, what I've learned and what I'm continually learning is that the more curious I am and the more willing I am to be open to learning and having new experiences, the stronger that desire is, the more curious I become. And so it's this self reinforcing cycle that just has huge rewards, um, not just as a reader, but as a person, to reinforce the feeling that being curious and learning is just positive. And I thought I would give a really good example. This is um, uh, something that worked really well for me. So my old friend Bob, when I would visit him at the coffee shop, he would always be sitting with his dogs, and he would have the New York Review of books on the table, and he was um, reading articles or reviews and things like that. And uh, it was so great because he would often just start a conversation on whatever topic the article that he was reading. So through the years, I eventually subscribed to the New York Review of Books and the London Review of Books, and I have one here. I've mentioned that I read poetry in the morning. It's not every morning. I would either read my periodical or read some poetry. I go back and forth. And even when I got to the point where I was subscribing to these fortnightly periodicals, which are still my absolute favorite papers to read, I love that they come out every 2 weeks, so they have to be more substantive than something that could fall out of favor in a 24-hour news cycle. They have more permanence to them. They're long-form reviews, so they really go into depth into the subject matter that they are discussing. They have experts in their fields, experts in the books that they're reviewing, actually talking about them, so the reviewer is often extremely knowledgeable in the topic. So it's a great paper. And initially what I would do is I would look at this, and at the top it says, there's an article on T.S. Eliot's letters. And then below it, there's something on conspiracy theorists, and a new book by Marilyn Robinson, and China after COVID. And what I would do is I would get the paper and I would open it up and I would just look for reviews or articles on the things that I was already interested in. And for a long time, I would just read those bits, and it was enjoyable. So for this, for example, I just read a poem by T.S. Eliot. In general, I enjoy reading T.S. Eliot, and so what I would do is just go straight to the T.S. Eliot article and read it, and it sort of reinforced things that I know. And eventually, I just started, I would pick articles that I was really unfamiliar with, and most of the time when I would start reading them, they were fascinating. I was learning that I'm really interested in a topic that I've never even considered, something that I don't know anything about, and in the span of 10, 15 minutes, all of a sudden I would, even if I don't actively go out afterwards and decide that's going to be the thing I'm going to start reading, it would just spark my imagination and my curiosity. And of course, also reading something that's so interesting that I actually do. And so, like for this paper, there's an article on the virus, a new novel by Marilyn Robinson called Jack. There's a review on a book called Last Loosening, a handbook for the con artist and those aspiring to become one. There's an article on slavery and revenge, a world beneath the sands, adventurers and archaeologists in the golden age of Egyptology, something on fish and fishing, and so on. Every one of these papers, 95% of the content is things that I know nothing about, and I make a point to make sure I'm constantly reading these articles that at the beginning don't really mean anything to me, and sometimes it's just like this big beacon of light, and I think this is the most fascinating topic. Other times it is boring, but what I've learned is that mentality of not assuming that because I'm not familiar with it, it's probably not very interesting, and instead thinking there are so many interesting things in the world. I know basically none of them, and I need to take every opportunity that I can to learn as much as I can. And it's not because it's a chore or there's some sort of obligation, but because there's real pleasure and rewards that come from it. And for me, these periodicals work really well. It's almost like a sampler pack, um, in the sense that I can just dip in and taste, uh, in small quantities, all sorts of things, and learn about, and then decide, well, here, if I like the review, surely I'll most likely want to, either would want to read the book, or would just be very interested in it. And eventually, um, that mentality really just overtook um, my general mentality with how I view what other people are doing, especially on BookTube when there's people talking about books that I'm very unfamiliar with, and just thinking like, what a huge advantage that I get to um, learn about so many things that I don't know. And then the next step is making the decision, do I want to commit 8, 10, 12, 20 hours on a certain topic? And it's just worked really well for me. So I just wanted to talk about, like, how do you end up actually wanting to read one of those difficult books? And to me, the answer is being a curious or adventurous reader, um, in a balance with being a deep reader, and reading the things that you're interested in, and kind of going back and forth. Um, Personally, these periodicals, the New York Review of Books and London Review of Books, um, were a great stepping stone to kind of recalibrate how I view the world, and how I want to take on new interests. So I thought it was worth talking about. I'd be interested to know uh, what sort of readers you are, if you think that you're someone that likes to read deeply or widely, and if you do constantly want to learn and be curious about all the all the things in the world, how did you get there? What happened? Was it schooling? I didn't really take that path for reading, or was it from meeting a friend or anything like that? So if you'd like to leave a comment, um, please do. I'd be interested. And thank you for watching.